Thank you for tuning in. This is our live fact check of President Trump's events. My name is Alan Piper. I'm the senior politics producer at NowThis. I am supported by our entire team of remote working producers, all working from home under self-isolation. We got a late signal on this, so this event is already underway. We are going to do our best to fact check it in real time. President Trump is meeting with leaders of the restaurant industry, and let's hear what they have to say.
Impact on our business, and so we're really looking forward to the process of reopening the economy, reopening the country. We already have about 1,000 locations around the country that have started to open the dining rooms with reduced capacity. We've added PPE, we've added safe and social distancing in the restaurants to ensure that people can come in. We have acrylic screens in the front counter. We have masks and gloves for the employees to ensure that everyone feels safe, our guests and our team members. I just wanted to thank the President, Mr. President, and your administration. I think you've acted quickly, swiftly, and with good measure. The CARES Act and the PPP had a tremendous impact on our businesses. I think there's a lot we think that can do to make a very good program even better. One of the things that we've talked about as we were kind of chatting here is this idea of extending the 8-week deadline. We think that 8-week deadline, when it was implemented, was probably 8 weeks probably seemed like an eternity, but today we're in the 10th week of the pandemic, and I think it's going to take some time for our restaurants and our owners to get back to the capacity levels and the traffic levels that we were seeing pre-COVID. And so a little more time, we think probably taking it to 24 weeks would be appropriate to allow for restaurant owners that are participating in the program to be able to manage through and rehire the employees, which is what the purpose of PPP was intended for. There was two other things that I think are important for us. One is we think business liability protection for small businesses is important. We're going to see potentially with the reopening of the economy with the
all right, there are a couple things here that I just want to jump into. We are hearing from Jose Sill, who is the CEO of Restaurant Brands International. A couple things he's mentioned. He has mentioned the Paycheck Protection Program. Now, this program was set up as a way to support small businesses. It is specifically intended for small businesses, but nearly 300 publicly traded companies have gotten about $1 billion in funds from it. Some of the money went to Trump cronies. Continental Materials, which had over $100 million in sales last year, got a $5.5 million loan from the program. Former Trump campaign Illinois Finance Chair Ronald Gidwitz is the majority stakeholder. The company that got the most money was a Dallas real estate firm that got over $53 million. The chair of the company is Monty Bennett, a major Republican donor. A private jet company founded by a Trump donor got $27 million, and a company tied to Trump's campaign manager got $800,000. Now, the other thing that Gil mentioned is protecting employers from liability if their workers get sick. We're going to get into more of that in just a moment.
And this was a very, some big announcements are coming and have just come out, and the market's up almost 1,000 points. You'll check your market. I'm sure you did before you walked in the room, but I imagine your company's doing better today than it was.
Now, the president is highlighting the fact that the market has been rebounding in part. It's important to note that the stock market is not a measure of the overall health of the economy. The stock market is a measure of how wealthy investors are doing, but of course 36 million Americans have lost their jobs in just the past few weeks.
It was really quickly, really quickly, like let's get it going immediately. So if you have somebody that's not going to make it, if you have somebody that's going to pass away, going to die, and if we have something that we think works, we want to get them immediately into those hospitals or wherever the people are located. So that's being talked about also with the FDA, with Dr. Stephen Hahn, who's doing a fantastic job. And so we're trying to expedite things. But very importantly, just overall, what big news it is medically. We are so far ahead of where you would normally be just from a logistical standpoint. And that's the other thing. We're also gearing up and close to geared up because we have tremendous people in the military, so they'll be able to deliver service very rapidly. So a lot of good things are happening. And
all right, well, it is, of course, painfully false to suggest that we are ahead of schedule on anything. We have highlighted the various ways in which this administration was slow to respond. And Shelby, if you can please drop into the comments that video on the timeline of President Trump's response, I think that would be more helpful than a lengthy fact check here.
Bring us here today. This is a great representation of restaurants from across the country. Jose with his 10,000, my 2 on Bourbon Street. I am the president and CEO of Galatoire's. We've been there since 1905.
Yeah, right.
And, restaurants are the cornerstone of so many communities where some big business is absent. Restaurants are there, and we employ so many people. We just appreciate how swiftly y'all have acted to bring relief our way. We think with just a few small changes in cover period and length of the cover period on the forgiveness of PPP, we have a real great opportunity. And, just the very nature of restaurants in general, we rely on social interaction. So it makes us really unique that we were hit hard quickly, and it's going to make our comeback really difficult. That being said, I'm glad to hear your news.
Yeah.
That there's
well, my
some-
news negates what you just said, because
Yeah.
you would be back into business like you had it.
Yeah.
No seats lost, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens, but it certainly negates it, yeah.
Yeah, so, in the interim, we appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you. Longer cure periods on the test periods on the loans would be incredible. A city like New Orleans, we have 1,500 restaurants, but only 400,000 people. And so when you look at that, how do we survive? We survive with leisure and business travelers. 19 million visitors last year. And that being said, it's going to take us a little time to ramp back up. So we're looking forward to that period of time, and we believe that you guys have the opportunity to help us. We greatly appreciate it. We've survived Hurricane Katrina. We've survived the BP oil spill.
Yeah.
Restaurateurs are a resilient group, very tenacious, and so we're there, and we appreciate your help.
So your area was amazing because it was hit hard, but it was very late. We didn't think it was going to be hit at all, and then all of a sudden it spiked up after you had a certain event.
Yeah.
And who knows what caused it, but maybe it was that.
Yeah.
And then it's doing incredibly well right now. It's really down at a low
Yeah,
number.
we've made great progress. The governor's done a really good job. That being said, 25% capacity is tough. To literally think that this week when we reopen at 25%, we'll lose.
So the president just made an allusion to the fact that things got really bad for New Orleans after Mardi Gras. As, of course, everyone probably knows, Mardi Gras draws people from all over the country and all over the world to celebrate in New Orleans. Now, it is important to note that the President of the United States spent all of January and February dismissing the threat of the coronavirus and suggesting that it was like the flu. And the fact that the President was not urging people to be aware of this problem, even though the World Health Organization and the CDC and members of his own administration had been flagging it, certainly contributed to the high number of people who traveled to New Orleans for Mardi Gras after the coronavirus was already spreading in the United States and we did not fully know about it as a public.
Park in New York City, but I'm also a founding member of the Independent Restaurant Coalition. We started just 7 weeks ago, and we're here because we got together to represent the 500,000 independent restaurants across America. I'm talking about the mom and pops, your local diner, the pizza place, the pasta joint, and the 3 Michelin star restaurant, and honestly, everything in between. The things that represent the cultural fabric of our cities and of our towns, and the things that I believe as a country we need to fight to keep. We also represent the 11 million people that work in those independent restaurants across the country. Listen, it's clear that this administration cares about our industry. And it's also clear that all of you understand the extent to which we are more specifically vulnerable than a lot of other industries in America. And I think that's why we're here today. And so I think it's just important to take a moment and acknowledge that and say thank you that we're taking this time.
Thank you, Will, very much.
PPP is important, and the changes that have already been talked about and are going to continue being talked about today are...
Now, they keep highlighting the importance of PPP, but that's the Paycheck Protection Plan, but I do want to highlight that less than 9% of the total funds from that program have gone to the restaurant industry, even though the industry has lost 27% of the total jobs.
Everyone here knows that last month alone, I think in the first half of April, more than 1 out of 4 people that applied for unemployment were restaurant workers. 1 out of 4. It's just insane. And so we've put forward a plan to members of Congress and to this administration that we put forward because it'll put all of those people that are currently unemployed back to work, such that by the third quarter of this year, we're going to be looking at unemployment reports that are astonishingly good, not to mention the supply chain that we represent. If restaurants go down, the commercial real estate industry, the farming industry. And so our plan helps bring unemployment back to where it needs to be, and it supports a lot of our other industries that rely on independent restaurants for their survival. And so we appreciate being here. We'd love the opportunity to talk more about this. I know that in times like this, a lot of people have their hands out. I don't take that lightly. I do believe that independent restaurants are more vulnerable than most and a really important part of this nation, and I don't want to lose them. And so we appreciate your consideration and your support.
Okay, thank you very much, Will. Appreciate it. Larry, please.
Thank you, sir. 48 states are opening. That's a big plus. And the vaccination research news was great today. So we see it.
So a couple things about that. 48 states are reopening to some extent. There is not a single state that has met the Trump administration's own guidelines on a statewide level of 14 days of decline. And that is striking that the president is urging states, he tweeted today, reopen America now. He's urging states to reopen ahead of his own administration's timetable, which many public health experts already believed was overly aggressive.
Have recovery, and I do too, and I think with the right policies we can have a booming next year. But the signs are housing.
This is Larry Kudlow. I'd like to highlight that we've been talking about the Paycheck Protection Plan, this program that is intended to support struggling small businesses. Larry Kudlow's wife, who is an artist, applied for one of these loans. Their combined net worth is over $25 million.
Million to 3 million. So there are some glimmers of hope. Kevin has some data on better credit card numbers. So it's a tough haul, but I think things are starting to turn. That's my take. Wish everybody luck.
I think so, Larry. Maybe much more than people understand, and you're starting to see that. Going to come back strong. Please.
Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, Secretary Scalia, Secretary, I want to thank you for having us here today. I have restaurants across the United States. We average 27 employees per restaurant. These are the small businesses across in each of these communities that those 27 people have families, have mortgages, have rents, have car payments to make every day. And being able to stay open and work with the governors and get the PPP money and to be able to give people reassurances that tomorrow is going to be better than it was today and to give them that hope has been really important for us, our business, and those families. And I want to thank you for your leadership and your team's leadership in doing so. One of the things we talk about in the business is how well we talk about treating others and bringing people into the family and bringing them into the restaurant like you bring them into your home. And that's what we do in the restaurant business every day. We treat everyone like family. And doing so and having the leadership here has been really helpful to us and the entire industry. And frankly, 8 weeks, 9 weeks ago, I was thinking about this Chinese nightmare, and I didn't want it to affect the American dream that we all had. And I'm a success story about the American.
I want to highlight, as people start talking about Chinese nightmare, diseases do not have nationalities. Though this disease began in China, it is not a Chinese disease. The World Health Organization and the CDC specifically advise against labeling diseases with nationalities. They don't carry passports. This disease is currently in 188 countries. The swine flu originated in North America, but no one has called it the American flu, to my knowledge.
Go ahead, Kevin. Let us know what's going to happen.
Yeah, sir, first of all, you might recall when we first started talking about the economic damage that was coming from the shutdown, that we emphasized right from the beginning that this industry and the travel industry were going to be the hardest hit. And so we've been focused like a laser beam on coming up with policy ideas to do something about it. And as you said, we've got a really good plan. The thing I could say is that if you look at the real-time data, as Larry said, that you really are starting to see glimmers of hope. And maybe even like you could even characterize it a little more optimistically than that. Larry's being super cautious, but the credit card data are really going up. The number of businesses open in the country is skyrocketing. I mean, the country's getting back now, and I think that there's a great reason for optimism for this group because.
I just want to put this in the context of 36 million people are currently unemployed. The unemployment rate is currently 14.7%, which is the worst since the Great Depression. And experts expect that it could soon be at 20 or even 25%. So these sanguine sentiments about the economy seem a bit misplaced at this moment.
Of thousands, but probably millions of lives. And we did the right thing, and now we have to open, and now we're going to do great. And if this comes along, what we're hearing medically from these great companies, these great geniuses, if this happens, that's really going to be something. So, great job, thank you. Please.
Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, Secretary Scalia, Secretary Mnuchin, it's an honor to be here today. My name is Marvin Irby, and on behalf of the National Restaurant Association, thank you for convening this meeting of these industry leaders on this very important subject. To be honest with you, normally at this time, I'd spend a lot of time telling you about this industry. But what's been clear over the last several months is that you get it. This administration gets it. You know everything about our world-famous chefs, our esteemed independents, our beloved brands that dot every community in this country. And I'm proud to say that for over 100 years, the National Restaurant Association has represented all restaurants that play a key role in our society and an integral role in our food chain. I have the opportunity that I get to speak to restaurateurs every single day. And I can confirm we desperately want to reopen. Our restaurants are desperate and are heartbroken, and at this time we can't provide the support and the comfort to the communities in which we serve. For too many restaurants right now, an incident happened 60 days ago that has crippled us, and before today's news, we did not see an end date until later this year. Programs like the Paycheck Protection Program are an incredible first step. And thank you, Secretary Mnuchin, for this program, which has benefited millions of small companies throughout this country. We also appreciate Ivanka Trump's dedication to our industry, and I personally want to thank you for the time you've taken to talk to our board over the last months of this crisis. Mr. President, the Payroll Protection Program would be a godsend.
Again, I want to highlight that less than 9% of the payroll protection plan's dollars have gone to independently owned restaurants. or even to the restaurant industry as a whole, even though they account for 27% of the job losses. Now we are hearing this is a room full of almost entirely white men who are not particularly representative of the restaurant industry as a whole. A couple of statements were made about this particular group earlier today. Eater published saying that the participants in the so-called Great American Economic Revival Industry Group include chains like McDonald's and Chick-fil-A and form a roster that is, quote, nearly devoid of people of color and entirely devoid of women. And then chef and historian Therese Nelson says, I'm still trying to understand how these chefs represent a true cross-section of restaurant owners. I feel like they're putting too much faith into this relief when we aren't even through the storm yet. So there are, I believe there is, so there are a couple of people of color. I do not believe there are any women restaurant owners in this room at this moment.
You disagree with that? Because I think deductibility is the biggest thing you can possibly do.
Mr. President.
This is such a strange statement that the president just made. He said, I think deductibility is the biggest thing that you can possibly do. He has been fixated on this idea for a while now, since he had a call with several celebrity chefs. The President of the United States is suggesting that the biggest tool to make the economy rebound is to make business meals at restaurants tax deductibles. Now, if you want to know how big of an impact that is going to have on the American economy, I want you to ask yourself, you as an individual, how many times have you gone to a restaurant specifically because you thought that you could take a business tax deduction for eating out? How many times has that led you to go to a restaurant and eat out? There will likely be some economic impact, but the idea that it is something that would broadly affect the majority of Americans, or that by itself could resuscitate an industry where there have been massive layoffs because of this crisis, is an odd claim, and not one that I am aware of any economists supporting.
By the way, how do you feel about that? Is that a big deal?
Yes, sir.
That would be an extraordinarily big deal.
Yes.
And how does that compare with what we're talking about with the time period? Payroll tax?
I would say deductibility, payroll tax deductions, all those things are spectacular, and we...
Okay, so the president's other weird solution to fix the economy is a payroll tax cut. That's a cut, a reduction of the amount that is withheld from your paycheck. 36 million Americans have just lost their jobs. A payroll tax cut has zero impact on them. You don't benefit from a payroll tax cut unless you are on payroll.
It is. Great.
Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, good afternoon. Thank you so much for your leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be here, and I deeply appreciate the opportunity. My name is Nirain. I represent Panera Bread. Panera has 2,500 cafes, revenues of about $6 billion, and we employ 140,000 people. The pandemic impacted us very deeply, as it did everybody else. We lost close to 50% of our revenue in the first week. Since then, it is slowly coming back, but we still have a long way to go. Now, the health crisis...
You got down by 50% or more than that?
50 to 60% was the revenue decline.
That's not bad.
And I think what's good is that it's actually coming back since that time.
Good.
Thanks to a lot of the innovation that we've been able to do.
Good. But, so you got maximum, though, 50% of revenue loss?
Yeah.
How'd you keep the other 50%?
So the 50% that we have by ensuring, so fortunately I think in Panera we have very strong omni-channel business.
Right.
So we have delivery, rapid pickup, drive-through.
You did very well.
And so on.
That's great.
Yeah.
Great job. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think we've had to innovate very quickly, and I'll share some of those ideas. So I believe that the health crisis is now becoming a financial crisis. with 36 million Americans unemployed and a humanitarian crisis as well, with about 54 million Americans fighting hunger. And therefore, I think opening up the economy right now in a phased manner is the right thing to do. I also believe that we as leaders need to also step up and do the right thing at this time and do what we can do, what's in our control. And I'll share some ideas and thoughts in terms of what Panera has been doing, largely with the intent to innovate and do that with compassion and heart. So for our furloughed employees, we have free family meals every week for them, emergency relief funds, and also we've made arrangements with peer companies that are actually hiring at this time, like CVS, Walmart, to hire our furloughed employees temporarily and then return them back. For customers, we've innovated very quickly. We've launched the curbside pickup service with geofencing and also free Wi-Fi outside the cafes because life is moving to outside the cafes. And also doing a lot for our communities, especially those impacted most by the pandemic. So doctors and nurses, we are serving about 50,000 meals to doctors and nurses in New York, children in the state of Ohio with our partnership with USDA. And also we've launched a program called Together Without Hunger with Feeding America and have pledged to serve 500,000 meals to children and families through Feeding America.
Great.
So I think it's very important at this time that we also step up. 85% of our cafes open. We were determined to keep them open so that we could keep our associates employed at that time, and therefore now we're beginning to open up the dining areas in phases, following all the guidelines, but also have stringent protocols that we've put in place, like plexiglass barriers, wellness stations for temperature checks, social distancing norms, etc.
Will you be keeping any of that? I mean, there are some innovations that have been made. Some people say maybe we'll keep it. Would you be keeping any of that or not really?
Yes, I think there's going to be a shift in how the consumers are going to interact with brands, and I think it is time for us to innovate. So another example is...
Would you ever keep the plexiglass barriers?
So I think we'll keep the plexiglass barriers.
I mean, on a permanent basis I'm talking about.
I think at least over the next 6 to 9 months.
Right, but could you see that being permanent? Because hopefully you're not going to have it that long, by the way, 9 months. But would you see a thing like that? You'd have to build a nicer version of it, as opposed to quickly throwing it up. But would you see something like that being permanent, possibly?
I think hopefully if the virus is under control and we've gotten to the other side of it, I think then we can get back to life as we once knew.
You'd rather not have it?
We'd rather move back to life as we once knew it, right? Rather not have
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Exactly.
Okay.
And another, I think, interesting innovation is that recognizing that there's so much high friction with high demand grocery items where you can't get them home delivered, we launched a new line of business called Panera Grocery in 10 days. And we're delivering, bakery items, fresh produce, dairy to customers in less than an hour on the same day. So I think the good thing is it's forced us to really innovate and be very responsive.
Good.
I think the restaurant industry is deeply, deeply appreciative of all the support and the efforts that you and the administration have made. I think the CARES Act has been hugely welcomed. I would like to in particular thank you for the PPP program because it's made a huge difference to our franchise partners and our associates. I think with a few of the amendments that we talked about, I'd fully agree with the 8 weeks to 24 weeks. I think that is badly needed. I think that will be hugely welcomed.
Steve, does that make sense from our standpoint? What do you think?
We're working on a technical fix that we do have bipartisan support for to extend it. I'm not sure it's that long, but I've spoken to the SBA committee and there is bipartisan support, so we're working on that.
And I think we talked about the limited liability. I think that's also a very important aspect. And thirdly,
the Democrats don't want to give you the liability provision. They just don't want to have that. Yeah. And it's crazy that they don't. But the Democrats do not want to give that to people, and that's not a good thing.
And I think the third thing
we'll
is...
get it anyway. Go ahead.
Our employees are, I think if we can eliminate the friction in the furloughed employees being able to access their unemployment benefits, that will also be fantastic. And
that the problem there is the states have old equipment in many cases, and they're unable to get the money. We gave the money out immediately, but the states are unable. Some states are unable to give it out. They have 40-year-old equipment, and some states are unable to get their act together. But we gave that out long ago, as you probably know.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Brooke, would you like to say a few words?
Mr. President, thank you. Just a few words. I am so grateful for all of you being here today. I am struck by the stories of true American dreams. I mean, starting at $3.45 an hour and then ultimately owning so many restaurants and hundreds of thousands, but I'm also hundreds of thousands of employees. But I'm also struck by this president and vice president.
So this is Brooke Rollins. She is part of the White House team. I'm highlighting that because it does appear that it is indeed true that out of all of these restaurant industry leaders, there is not one single woman invited here. Women own more than 50% of all restaurants in the U.S., so it is striking that there is not a single woman represented here. Brooke Rollins, who is speaking now, is not part of the group of restaurant owners. She is part of the White House.
This vice president, but truly the American entrepreneurs that are sitting around the table today and working alongside all of you as we bring this country back to even greater heights than we ever knew possible. The transition to greatness is really what America and the American dream is all about. So thank you all for being here. Know that we are here to help you always, and we are here to make sure that what this president led on and has achieved will be once again very, very soon. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Brooke. Great job.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, and Secretaries for having me here today. My name is Tim Love. I'm a chef and owner of a few restaurants in Texas and Tennessee. I also am the chef of 4 major music festivals and food festivals around the country. So I've been greatly affected by obviously what's happened here, along with everybody else in this room. But what I wanted to speak to you about today is that to touch on the PPP and to kind of clarify what we were saying is the 24 weeks is only set up because certain restaurants aren't able to open now. In Texas, we were able to open on May 1st, and I quickly activated the PPP and tried to get all my employees back. I've hired 80% of my workforce. I started with 490 employees. We've got about 400 employees already back. And I will say it's encouraging to see people come out. They're excited. They want to be out.
What would have happened if you didn't have PPP?
Well, if I didn't
Would
have
you have survived it? Would you have gotten by?
I probably would have gotten by, but this allows us to do it the way that we feel like it should be, to take care of the employees first. We want to take care of our employees and make sure they're safe. Same activation we're having when opening the restaurants. We want to open the restaurants safe.
So a couple things here that I just want to jump onto. This restaurant owner is talking about how good it is that Texas has been reopening. Texas had its single deadliest day so far on Saturday. And also there is the reference of to how the availability of PPE, personal protective equipment, is related to all of this. There have been widespread shortages of personal protective equipment throughout this crisis, and this comes even though many people were calling on this administration to get into widespread production of personal protective equipment in January. We now know that Dr. Rick Bright testified that he sounded an urgent alarm for a need for more masks and personal protective equipment to be prepared in preparation for this crisis. And we know that the largest American producer of masks testified that he offered to make 1.7 million masks per week for the U.S. government in January and was turned down. And as a result, we went into a March where nurses and doctors were reusing masks that were meant to be disposable. Nurses in New York City were wearing garbage bags instead of protective gowns. And so by any reasonable metric, the production of personal protective equipment has been a disastrous part of the story of this nation's response to this crisis.
You will. How many restaurants are there total, everything, in the United States? How many are there? Yeah. How much? 650,000 restaurants. Who would think that's 11% of the overall? 650,000 restaurants. Who would ever think that's possible even, right? That's good. And it's been a great business over the years, and it'll be
And
better
there'll be
than ever.
650,000 again, so long as you
That's
keep doing what you're
fantastic.
doing. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
no, it's, well, I think deductibility gets that. Actually, I think
I would agree with
you'll
that.
go up very substantially. They got rid of a lot of restaurants when they ended that. People don't realize it. Then you get used to it. You had fewer restaurants. They rented to other things. Now I don't know what they're going to rent to.
And to your
frankly.
point about that, sir, the deductibility, which you can easily identify with, and it does spread wealth amongst the restaurants, most definitely. We're talking just about with the PPP to get people.
So President Trump is saying that that when you got rid of deductibility, a lot of restaurants just went away. So ending deductibility of entertainment expenses was actually part of the Republican tax bill. There are no economists, so it is President Trump who is responsible for doing it if it did in fact hurt restaurants and the entertainment industry. But there are, to our knowledge, no mainstream economists who are suggesting that making business meals more tax deductible will be a major revolution for the U.S. economy.
On the other side, the Bubba Gumps, the Rainforest, and they're all company owned. It's been devastating, and it's funny you brought up about China. I should have realized it was going to be a bad year for China when my general manager tweeted out, freedom for Hong Kong. So that started my year with China.
And you kept it quiet, right?
And
you kept that quiet.
So I'm still trying to work that out. And here comes something else.
He owns the Houston Rockets, in case you don't know. And he's and by the way, he's a great guy, great family, great everything. And yeah, he did cause you a little ruckus. Whatever happened to him, by the way? Is he still working for you?
Yes, he is.
He must be pretty good.
Yes, because it's just it's a trick question, but he is. But Mr. President, everybody's talking about the PPP, and when your team designed the PPP and said let's bring it through the SBA, I think it was an unbelievable idea, and you did exactly what you needed to do. But I'm one of those people when it started being pitted against, because I'm a sole proprietor, but I do $4 billion in revenue, and I would have been that billionaire that took the money from the little business. So I was not able to take the PPP money, and I caught so much criticism because I was the first person who did lay off 40,000 employees, because the world doesn't understand that when you shut everything down from your casino.
I just want to highlight two sentences that have come out of this gentleman's mouth. He has acknowledged that he is a billionaire, and he's just said that he laid off 40,000 employees.
And I wanted to put 40,000 people back to work May the 1st, but couldn't take the criticism, and even from the administration there was some, that bigger companies shouldn't be taking this money, but I don't have the ability to put those 40,000 people back to work. So I just wish that don't add any money, but just divide it up and
So you're saying that because your restaurants aren't split up among thousands of people that own restaurants, and you have it yourself in the company?
Yeah, that it would have been one person taking this money,
So
but your team specifically wrote the bill for any restaurant under 500. This was for the restaurant business, which has only gotten 9% of the money. But if you would just split it up, and I'm not saying add any more money, but add a category for the larger private restaurateur that could go out and take this money and put it in a different bucket, so it wouldn't be me taking this money away from the little beauty salon.
So what happened to you then, Tillman? So where are you on that whole thing? How did you do with the PPP? How did it work out for your company?
I took the money and sent it back and did not spend a dollar of it because
they found out you're very rich, and they said, what the hell?
You know what? But I also was the first person that opened the leveraged finance market and went and borrowed $300 million at 12%, where just 3 months earlier borrowed at 3% because I needed the liquidity to keep the company afloat.
So what did you do? You went out very early, right, for the money? And you found the market it was opened even at that early days.
Yes, right? I borrowed $300 million. to add to liquidity, but it wasn't enough to hire back all my employees, which I would have loved to have done with the PPP.
What do you do with your basketball players that are making $25 million a year?
I have two of them that make 40, Russell and James.
By the way, they are good players.
They are good, but yes, they are getting paid
Could
because
I
there's a
ask you, just
collective
out of
bargaining agreement, and that's why.
Tillman, what's going to happen with basketball? Can you give us because I would be interested. Do you have any idea what they're doing now?
Yes. I think what they're doing is waiting to see what happens in certain states and if we're going to be able to play, making sure the virus continues to go in the right direction in the next few weeks. And I think that if things keep going the way that it's going, I think the NBA, the commissioner, Adam Silver, who's done an unbelievable job through this, and the owners, I think, will make the decision to try to start the season up again.
Will you finish the season or not?
I think that there's talk about finishing the season, playing X amount of games. The players need to play to get paid, and right now they're taking a 25% pay cut. And because they own 50% of our revenues, the players, unlike the other sports. And so they want that revenue and that television revenue, even if it's not the people in the stands revenue, so they can get paid.
Could you go immediately to playoffs, or is that not really possible?
I think that they would use I think that we would play some games just to get it going again and create the interest and then go right into the playoffs. But I think it'll be great for America. We're all missing sports, and everybody, wants to see these great NBA teams. But
good luck with it.
Thank you. But just create a category for us, Mr. Secretary.
Well, Steve, what do you think about that? I mean, he's got a unique situation. He has a lot of restaurants. It's a big company, but
but I can't pay him.
You have other people where the company is the same size, but you have 2,000 owners. What do you think of that?
Well, it's a complicated issue, Mr. President.
As
I've said before, we didn't anticipate the Los Angeles Lakers, who I'm a big fan of, would be taking a PPP loan. And as a result of that, there was a lot of backlash around that.
Who paid it back?
And we went through the certifications.
I'm saying that for the media. They paid it.
Again, we realize the issue, how it impacts your work.
So, all right, several things here. So, this speaking now was the owner of the Houston Rockets talking about how he laid off 40,000 people because he could not afford to keep them on the payroll. I just want to highlight that he could have paid those 40,000 people $85,000 a year for the year out of his own pocket and still stayed a billionaire. He would still be a billionaire if he had personally paid those 40,000 people $85,000 a year out of his pocket. Just want to provide that context.
If we could just do something with lease terminations, because I'm the largest operator in New York for full-service restaurants, and the $1 million leases, let them protect their rights, the landlords.
What's your largest restaurant? What is it, New York?
Del Frisco's, Mastro's, Martin's, the Strip House, the Bill's Burger and Rockefeller Center, Dos Caminos, on and on. So, but if we could
Good job you've done. I mean, you got hit by the plague, right? But outside of that, you've done a hell of a job.
Just trying to keep up with it.
It just brought you back to earth a little bit.
We were definitely brought back to earth.
You really have. You've done a fantastic job. Hey, you're a friend of mine for a long time. And,
Thank you, sir.
I have to say, you paid me rent for a long time, right?
Absolutely.
For Rainforest
Never
and
missed
some
a
other
payment.
things. And you were never late. Now you're
a tough landlord.
A great gentleman. Really a great gentleman. Steve, it's an interesting case, okay? Do the best you can. Good luck with the basketball.
Thank you, sir.
You have a hell of a team.
And
thank you.
all of you.
Say hello to those two great players, all of your players. But, man, they can play, huh?
They can play.
So you say they make 40 a year.
Russell and James both make $40 million a year, and they were still getting paid. So a lot of my employees really wanted that PPP money.
You want them to play this year?
Yes, sir.
How many?
So I want to give you a little bit more information here. So some of the people who are really getting crunched are the people who work in stadiums, often the people in food service. So multiple NBA players have announced that they are donating thousands of dollars to those employees who are missing pay on this season, and they are trying to help make them whole. As far as we can tell, none of the NBA owners are paying out of their pocket to try to help anyone. Now let's see what Jared Kushner has to say.
Because the restaurant business has never been closed before for a period of time. So this is truly a unique historical situation that's occurred, and we're all in this together to try to figure out the best way back. But the quicker that we can help you figure out how to get demand up, the quicker you can hire back employees, and we can get Americans back to enjoying all of your fine establishments. So thank you for all you're doing, and thank you, Mr. President, for your leadership.
So Tillman, he took a ventilator job where the country basically had no ventilators, essentially, and built an incredible empire for building ventilators in a period of very short time. And now we're supplying ventilators all over the world. It's an amazing thing. We got no credit from the fake news media, but what are you going to do? Can't win them all. And now the testing today on the Washington Post, they actually had a headline that the testing is there, but the people aren't there. We have so much testing. I'm sure the person that drew that headline in the Washington Post will be fired today sometime.
The president is misrepresenting this headline. He's trying to make it sound as if we have more tests than people in the country. It is not true at all. The issue is that in states that have produced a large number of tests, there are not yet enough people coming forward to take the tests, in large part because they often don't know that they're available, because for so long it has been impossible for anyone other than the truly sickest people to get a test. There was a period of time here in New York where one of the largest health providers said that doctors and nurses would have to stop taking tests themselves because there were not enough to go around for the patients. This led to, in at least one instance that we documented at NowThis, a nurse working for an entire week with the coronavirus, fearing that she might have the coronavirus, but not knowing because she was not allowed to have a test. Who knows how many people were put at risk? She didn't want them to be put at risk. The tests were simply not available.
Like yourself, I'm a New Yorker and a career changer. I was a former bond trader at Goldman Sachs, and now I own restaurants in Brooklyn, most notably Lilia and Missy in Williamsburg.
Good.
We help make every day a good day. Along with Thomas and Will, we're founding members of the Independent Restaurant Coalition, and we're grateful to have a seat at this table for the first time. The impact catalyzed by this pandemic is enormous. The prolonged economic shutdown created challenges for our industry that has to be met with policy to inject liquidity, investment, consumption, and hiring. The immediate and coordinated response by your administration to support out-of-work employees was inspiring, and it should make us all proud to be Americans. The intention of PPP to support small businesses and restaurants was pragmatic and encouraging. We have all agreed that it wasn't perfect, but we're working on it to fix it so that it could help us. But we need those fixes now. Like me, I have it, and I can't use it. I'm in the clock zone of 8 weeks. PPP is a bridge.
So do you agree with what they're saying in terms of timing?
Immediately, it must happen.
And you agree with the 24 number?
Yes, absolutely.
Did you guys meet before this or something? No, did you have a little meeting to discuss this, perhaps? Yeah, okay.
Well,
now I feel better because everyone's exactly wants the same thing.
What is incredible about this Independent Restaurant Coalition, this did not exist 7 weeks ago. Restaurant owners didn't talk to each other, ever. And we were able to...
I bring people together. You've seen that in government. I bring the Democrats together with the Republicans, right?
And it's been a beautiful thing.
I'm only kidding.
We've been able to talk. We've been able to be creative and figure out ways to bring this
That's
industry
great.
back.
I think it's great. You got together and a lot of good suggestions have been made, and it's been made uniformly, so we really know your opinion as opposed to having all different ideas.
That's correct.
That's really great.
So PPP is a bridge. It will help restaurants reopen our doors. It will help restaurants reemploy 11 million workers that are currently not working. In an effort to keep those doors open and to keep our people employed, we've proposed a stabilization plan and we look forward to discussing more in the future with you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great. How'd you go?
Again, I just want to highlight again, everyone is talking about the Paycheck Protection Program. I do want to highlight that less than 9% of the PPP funds actually went to independent restaurants.
Better on every
See, it's
every
just,
facet.
you love the restaurant business, right?
I love it.
I have friends that are in the restaurant. They love the restaurant. There's no business they want to go into.
We view you as one of us.
Yeah. Well, it's
We
true.
do.
Yeah. No, it's great. I know your business very well. People, unlike, well, you know, there are other businesses, but just about as much as any business, they love being in the restaurant business. So that's great.
It's good to get out of the...
So you made a good move.
Oh, yes.
Did you make a good move financially?
I did. Very, very well.
It worked out fine, too.
Our restaurants are more profitable than the hedge fund that I worked at for 7 years.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yes.
Now we don't have to give them anything.
But I want to go back to that because I want to reopen as soon as possible.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Thank
Okay,
you.
great, good. Good job, too. I know the one restaurant, I know it's great.
Thank you very much.
Gene, this is a man of great genes. His name is Gene, and his father was a terrific gentleman. You know that, right?
He's referring to Eugene Scalia, who is Trump's labor secretary. He is the son of the late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. As an attorney, Eugene Scalia worked on various business matters, including suing to undo many of the consumer protection rules under Dodd-Frank on behalf of Wall Street. He also aided Walmart in striking down a Maryland law that would force the company to pay more for employee health care. The AFL-CIO opposed his nomination and confirmation as labor secretary because of his past as a, quote, union buster, saying that making the Labor Department, whose mission is to defend the rights of workers and enforce the law, a satellite office of a corporate right-wing law firm, flies in the face of working people's clearly expressed desires.
I cautioned the Congress that there would be problems, but we will continue to work with them to get those payments out. But even as we do that, we know that we're pivoting. We're opening. We're reopening across the country. There are glimmers and more than that as we begin that reopening, and so we will be focusing too on helping workers transition from unemployment back onto the job. And you hear a lot of numbers. A number that really sticks with me is a couple different surveys have shown, federal surveys have shown that 90% of workers who are unemployed right now have said it's temporary. And I want to make that right. I want to make that true. That's why, Mr. President, you want to safely but promptly reopen. And so we'll continue to work with...
That's a very important number.
90%.
If you go into a real big recession and you don't have a number like that, that's a tremendous number. That's really a great, it's a testament. Because again, it was artificially turned on and off. But now it's off and we're going to turn it back on. It's been turned on as of, I don't know, it almost feels like today is the first day. I think last week it didn't feel the same. Now it feels good. People are starting to go out. They're opening. They get it. We understand the disease much better than we did when it first came in. Nobody understood it. Nobody's ever seen it before. And it feels much different. I mean, today's almost like the first day. But the expression that we like to use, right? Transition to greatness. We're going to be back. And what you said is a very important thing. People...
So the president keeps trying to suggest that we are done with this, that we're on the other side. I want to highlight that nearly 2,000 people died in the U.S. in just the last 24 hours. There were about 25,000 new cases in just the last 24 hours. It just is not true to suggest that we have prevailed against this disease, as the president repeatedly suggests. We are at about 90,000 American deaths right now, and the number is continuing to rise.
Mr. President, Secretary Mnuchin, Vice President Pence, Secretary Scalia, thank you for having us here today. Of course, I'll echo what everybody else has said, how proud we are to be sitting here at the White House in your home. To be able to share some of our struggles and hopes and aspirations. The restaurant profession is a profession that's always dynamic, and you've seen that around this table with some of the things that my colleagues are doing, but we're also very united. As you've seen, and you just responded to the 24 weeks. Did we have a meeting before? Certainly we had a meeting before. Did we talk about it? Certainly we talked about it. Because we want to be unified in our approach, whether you have 650 restaurants, 2 restaurants, 6 restaurants, 1,000 restaurants, it doesn't really matter. We all are nurturers at heart, and we want our restaurants to reopen so that they can nurture our guests, our communities, and finally our country. There's something to be said for going last, because I just want to agree with everything that everybody else has said around this table, so I won't repeat it and bore us with more of the same. But I will tell you a story, a personal story, two personal stories, if I may. One about the PPP, and thank you very much, because it's been a lifesaver in many ways for me. I have restaurants, of course, where I have not been able to use the PPP yet. But I also have...
Why is that?
Because we can't open yet. And there's no point in me hiring back my staff.
Where?
California, New York, Las Vegas, and South Florida.
I mean, I hear they're going to keep Los Angeles closed till the end of August. Is that a fact?
That's a good question. I'm in Napa Valley, but I'm not really sure about Los Angeles. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the mayor wants to do that.
Yeah.
That's a death wish.
Yeah.
Because you know there's death on both sides. You know that. There's-
President Trump keeps saying that there will be more deaths from not reopening the country. There have been 90,000 deaths, roughly, from this disease in the U.S. What the mayor of Los Angeles' remarks were not that everything would stay totally locked down forever, as President Trump is suggesting. He said that the city will not fully reopen until there is a vaccine.
I'm extremely thankful and grateful for all the work that you and your team have done so quickly to help us. On our restaurant side, I echo what everybody else has said. It's a little more complicated. I also want to thank you for voicing your support of BIG, which is our business interruption group, which I started with a couple other chefs, and has grown quite large. And we've started to make some inroads with the insurance companies, certainly with some of the congressmen and some of the senators. So we continue to work on that for all businesses, not just for restaurant businesses. Finally, I want to talk about a small farm in Orwell, Vermont. A small farmer named Diane St. Clair, who is by herself with her husband. And this is about the supply chain and how important restaurants are in so many different aspects. But we reduce it down to that we love, that depend on us as restaurateurs and as chefs. It's a woman who has 8 cows, who gets up every morning 7 days a week to milk her cows, let them out the pasture, begin to make her butter, bring her cows back at 4 or 5 o'clock, milk them again, and put them to bed every day. I am the sole source of her revenue. She's not able to sell her butter anywhere else, so she's not making butter today. The impact that restaurants have in our communities, in our states, and in our country are extraordinary. We are, in many cases, the first job people have. My first job was in a restaurant as a dishwasher, making a little less than $350, but that was just of my age, and being able to move up. We give people the second chance in restaurants. And finally, people's last jobs are in restaurants. Those who are retired and on benefits are augmenting their benefits by working in restaurants. We don't really care about your education. We're not concerned about where you come from, your religious beliefs. We are open to everybody. We employ the most women of anybody beside the federal government, the most single-parent women.
And yet there are no women as part of this panel representing the restaurant industry. Again, I'd like to highlight that more than half of all restaurants and food businesses in the U.S. are owned by women, but there is no seat for them at this table.
For a French chef named Roland Hennon, who asked me one day, why do cooks cook? And I was certainly intimidated. I was young, and I said, Chef, I don't know, why do cooks cook? He said, we cook to nurture people. And there was something inside of me that resonated with, and I embraced the idea of nurturing people. And I have 1,200 employees. There are over 1,180 who are unemployed today that I desperately want to bring back to work so that we can not only nurture each other, but nurture those who come into our restaurants. Again, I want to thank you for having us here today. I want to thank all my colleagues for articulating everything that we wanted to say in such a profound way, and I appreciate the opportunity. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Beautiful story with the woman with the 8 cows.
Yep.
You wouldn't think that. Restaurateurs do, especially, I guess, some with an individual restaurant or a couple of restaurants, they do that a lot, don't they? They buy directly.
They do. Yeah, we support so many small farms around the country. I started an initiative called Big Hearts and Small Farms with 5 other chefs, just so that we can offer people an opportunity to buy some of the food from some of these small farms around the country.
Tillman doesn't do that. I don't think you do that with your 8 cows, right? He doesn't do it.
It's a little different, but it goes from the very small to the very big, and that's what restaurants are all about, and I'm proud to be part of this community.
What's the difference in butter? Tell me, the difference in butter between what she sells you and what you would normally be able to buy out of curiosity. I don't want to.
It is extraordinary because it is truly a seasonal product. So the butter changes flavor and color depending on the season. So in the spring, when they're eating green, when they're grazing on grass, green grass, the butter is
That's
a beautiful
fantastic.
orange hue. And of course, in the summertime, it turns lighter because they're eating hay. So, and the
Mike
flavors
just said there's
taste.
no comparison. He knows.
It's just there's a tremendous difference in the butter from. Oh,
and
yeah,
you
it's
probably pay less too, right?
Well, I don't know how much I pay. It's not about how much I
no,
pay.
but
It's about supporting her and what she's trying to do.
Right, but would you pay less, generally speaking, when you do those things you do directly with the farm?
You know, when we deal directly with the farmers, I never talk about price. It's always about quality, because
Yeah.
we're about quality
Okay, good.
and building relationships with people. I've been buying Diane's butter for over 20 years.
No kidding.
She did tell me one time, I'll tell you a little story again if I can, that she had to raise the price of her butter. And I said, Diane, I really don't know how much your butter costs, but I appreciate you telling me this. And she said, but I also want to tell you why. And I said, okay, tell me why, Diane. She said, my son was accepted at NYU, and I need to pay for his tuition. This is what happens when a guest goes into a restaurant and spends $1. You're supporting all of these people. You're supporting this young man who's going to get a degree from NYU. Should I negotiate with her on price?
Yeah.
No.
I think it's great. Thank you very much. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, Mike.
Well,
I think the media wants us to go quickly. I
Yeah,
know that John is
I'll
over
be,
there.
I'll go very quick.
He wants to hit us with a question so bad.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, and I have had the great privilege of sitting in this room alongside the President on many occasions over the last 3.5 years. I don't know that I've ever been more inspired by the optimism, the resilience, the love of what you do, and the people that you employ and the people that you serve than I've been today. So thank you all for sharing your stories. The President has brought together here our top economic team, the Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of the Labor, all the people that have been involved in standing up the whole of government response. But from the standpoint of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, let me just say thank you. This industry, 650,000 restaurants strong, had to make very, very hard choices. I want to assure you, you said, Sean, that you all consider the President to be one of you. And I can tell you, my friend considers himself to be one of you, and he always will. But he understood when we asked the American people, and we asked businesses like the thousands represented here, to shut down, to go to drive-through services, to find ways to innovate to meet your customers. We knew the sacrifices that were involved in that. The President directed our economic team to find a way, paycheck protection, to stand up and come alongside. But your decision.
So there's been a lot of overly rosy characterization of the Paycheck Protection Plan. I'm going to run through some details about it at the end of this.
And you are to be commended on behalf of the President. And all.
Also, if you guys have questions, I'm going to try to answer some of them at the end, so go ahead and type them in the comments.
We're going to go to our weekly call with America's governors. And I'm proud, as the President is, that as we sit here today, 48 states have announced plans to reopen. It was a month ago the President had our task force release a plan to open up America again.
So, yes, the President released a plan to open up America again, and Phase 1 required 14 consecutive days of decline. And in fact, no state has completely met that on a statewide level. So it is striking and strange that the president and vice president would be pushing, urging, and celebrating the rapid reopening of states that are not meeting their own guidelines.
This pandemic has been that the food supply has not been interrupted. And I honestly didn't know, Mr. President, before we got into this, that roughly half of America's food needs are met in restaurants and in those 650,000 establishments that we're talking about here today. And through this pandemic, not only did you innovate, you found ways to continue to meet that food need and keep food on the table of Americans, but I also heard just a week ago that it was restaurants that were transferring what you had in storage to your local grocery stores, to your local food banks, to make sure that Americans didn't miss any meals in the course of this pandemic. So for all those reasons, I say thank you. And just know that in this president and in this entire team, we are going to be partners with you, and we're going to bring back America and all of America's great restaurants bigger and better than ever before. And it's going to be sooner than you think.
Mike, what are the two states that did not open?
48 states have released plans. There's two that are, we expect them to be releasing plans very soon.
Who are they?
I'll get that to you before we talk to the governors.
Is Connecticut?
Can't do anything. So.
It'll open. It'll happen quickly. So just briefly, the Paycheck Protection Program has delivered over $30 billion in aid to more than 250,000 restaurants. Up to 95% of that funding is going directly to the workers' payroll. You know that? On Friday, the SBA published the loan forgiveness application, which ensures that all businesses, including restaurants, will not be penalized as long as they make good faith efforts to rehire all of their employees. You know that? I signed a bill providing federally funded pay to sick people that are sick and for family leave. So you have for sick and family leave, and that's a very important bill. So
now, this paid sick leave is only during this crisis. Roughly 30% of Americans do not regularly have paid sick leave, and that is a public health crisis in itself.
Tax refunds by deducting their losses from the 2018 through 2020 against taxes they paid for the previous 5 years. That's a big deal. And then, as you know, we're going to Congress, and this is more pertinent to what we're talking because you knew all of what I just said. You've been living through it. Restore the restaurant deduction to help jobless restaurant workers. So if a company pays or somebody pays, they get a deduction. That's going to create a tremendous amount of business. I think you're going to have to open a lot of additional restaurants in this country.
This is an utterly unfounded statement to suggest that making business meals more tax deductible will require many more restaurants to have to open.
Tax credit that Americans can use for domestic travel, including visits to restaurants. That's a big deal. Grant restaurants more flexibility under the PPP. That's what we're talking about, right? And protect workers and businesses alike with curbs on frivolous litigation, a thing I know something about. There's a lot of frivolous litigation, so we don't want somebody.
President Trump does know a thing or two about frivolous litigation. His campaign is actually suing to keep some presidential ads off the air, some campaign ads off the air that feature a quote of him saying that the media coverage of the coronavirus is a hoax. Even though it is a video clip of him saying it, and you can hear him saying the words, he is claiming that it is false and suing to try to stop it.
All the greatest political crime in American history. What do you think of Mr. Barr's decision here?
Well, I think if it was me, they would do it. I think for them, maybe they're not going to. I don't know. I'm surprised because Obama knew everything that was happening. I don't think Obama knows where he is in a lot of ways. I saw his statements the other day, and I think that, frankly, they weren't very good. That's President Obama. As far as Biden's concerned, I can't tell you. Only he knows what he knows. I don't think he knows too much. But I think Obama and Biden knew about it. They were participants, but So I'm a little surprised by that statement. I don't.
So the president has suggested that Barack Obama and Joe Biden should have to spend the rest of their lives in prison for a crime that he calls the worst crime in history, that he has been reluctant to actually say what it is. I'll go into it a little bit more at the end of this.
I don't know what he said about this. You have to understand, I was coming into this room as that statement was being made. So I don't know exactly.
He said we cannot allow this process, the legal process, to be hijacked by efforts to drum up criminal allegations, investigations of either candidate. He seemed to be suggesting...
Well, I think you'd have to ask him what that means, because I'm in no position to tell you that. I've stayed away from it. I'm relying on the Attorney General to do the job.
Well, of course, the president has not stayed away from it. He has been tweeting nonstop about the so-called Obamagate as the U.S. death toll drew closer and closer to 90,000 Americans. He has been steadfastly focused on complaining about President Obama and the Russia investigation.
That Obama and Biden were involved, and as to whether or not it was criminal, I would think it would be very serious, very, very serious. It was a takedown of a president, regardless of me. It happened to be me. And in my opinion, it was an illegal takedown. And but I'm going to let the...
This is not true. And I'll get into it more. I want to just hear what he has to say before we get into it more.
Out of it. So I would say that I heard that just a little while ago, a few minutes ago. I'll have to look at it exactly as to what was said, what was meant. I will say this. We have an honorable Attorney General. He's going to do an honorable job. He's a very honorable man, and he's going to do a very honorable job. But I am surprised only in that I have no doubt. Personally, I have...
Actually, there have been widespread calls for the Attorney General to step down from his position for seeming to abuse his office to act as a spin doctor for the President of the United States instead of acting as America's lawyer. He misrepresented the contents of the Mueller report to the extent that Robert Mueller had to issue a rebuttal. He dropped charges against Michael Flynn after Michael Flynn had pleaded guilty to crimes. And we'll go into a little bit more of this in a moment.
Okay. Any other questions?
Do you agree with Peter Navarro, who said the CDC let the country down in terms of testing?
I think they work very hard. Don't forget, they've been here for many years. It's not, they don't work for me, they work for the country. They've worked very hard. When we took over in terms of, getting involved, Mike headed up the task force. He worked with CDC. And I could ask Mike to give you part of it, but I will say they had no test, and one of the tests had a problem very early on, but that was quickly remedied, and now we have the best tests anywhere in the world. I think I give ourselves a lot of that credit, a lot of the brilliant people that worked on testing, a lot of the brilliant people that worked on the ventilators, to a point where we have the best testing in the world, we have the best ventilators and distribution in the most ventilators in the world. It's not even close. So I can't do it. I would like to ask Mike that question. CDC, you work with them all the time, certainly much more than I do, Mike.
Oh, we do, Mr. President. And let me say, I think Peter Navarro's point was that CDC and our public health labs at the state level were operating with an arcane testing system. And it was one of the reasons why early on we brought in all of the commercial labs around the country. The president created a consortium of these commercial labs, and we reinvented testing in America. That's the reason why at the end of February we had done a total of 8,400 tests at that time using state public labs and the CDC labs.
Actually, this is not true. By the end of February, the U.S. had not even performed 500 tests.
Innovating testing in America. We now reached 11 million tests. I think you heard the statistics. More than 400,000 tests yesterday. And we're actually hearing, as the president said earlier, we're hearing reports of excess capacity that I think the state of New York, Governor Cuomo reported that he has the ability to test 15,000 people a day, but they were only testing 5,000 people. We've heard the same
So
reports
this
from
is
Florida and
misleading.
other states.
This idea of excess capacity is not that there are more tests than people. It's just that the ability to do tests has come so late that there is, that now the word is only starting to get out that more people can be tested than have been.
Capacity and the supplies to be able to move into phase one reopening, and we're going to continue to make that a reality.
We've made a lot of governors look very good, that I can tell you. I'm reading some of the reviews on some of the governors, and they're getting these reviews. Well, we were able to get them ventilators that they didn't have. We were able to get them testing that they still wouldn't have. We were able to get them a lot of things that they...
Well, this is also not entirely true. Governors and mayors and other local leaders have really had to step up to do the job of the federal government since the federal government declined to do that. On March 16th, on a call with governors, President Trump told governors, ventilators, medical equipment, all of this, try getting it yourselves. This led to a certain amount of chaos, which forced governors to take some strange measures. The Republican governor of Maryland actually personally negotiated a private deal with South Korea to get 500,000 tests from them.
...a year. China pays them $38 million a year. And they're a puppet of China. They're China-centric, to put it nicer, but they're a puppet of China. And I think they've done a very... Even when I did the ban, Mike remembers this very well. When I did the ban, they thought it was inappropriate to do. I did a ban very early. If I didn't do that ban, you would have lost hundreds of thousands of more people in this.
None of these things are true. The ban did not come early. 39 other states had bans at or around that time. Also, it was not a ban. Over 400,000 people, some 40,000 people continued to enter the country after the restrictions went into effect, and the World Health Organization did not condemn it, in fact. They merely said that it by itself was not effective at stopping and preventing the spread of the disease.
Sleepy Joe Biden said the same thing. He came out, he said I was xenophobic. You believe that one, Tillman? I was xenophobic because I said you can't come in if you come from China. You can't come into our country.
This is a false claim that he keeps making about Joe Biden. He claims that Joe Biden said that the travel restrictions were xenophobic. No, I will read you what Joe Biden said. What he said was, this is no time for Donald Trump's record of hysteria, xenophobia, hysterical xenophobia, and fear-mongering to lead the way instead of science. Vice President Biden was highlighting the fact that President Trump has a long track record of attacking people from outside of this country who come here, attacking immigrants, attacking Muslims, attacking anyone he perceives as different from himself. It is not a shocking statement to accuse the president of xenophobia. He did not say that the travel restrictions were an act of xenophobia.
That's up to you. He's an Obama employee. I understand he had a lot of problems with the DOD. There was an investigation on him, on the Inspector General. I don't know anything about it. So I don't know him, never heard of him, but they asked me to terminate him. I have the absolute right as president to terminate.
So this is an interesting case that we're going to have to report more on. So the president has terminated some 4 inspector generals in the past few weeks, which is really sort of a startling turn of events. The idea is for inspector generals to have independence so that they can be watchdogs of the government. This particular inspector general at the State Department is said to have been looking into misuse of State Department resources and personnel by Secretary of State Pompeo. Pompeo called for the ouster of the IG, and President Trump did it. President Trump is also saying that he did not know who the person was. It is startling how often the President of the United States brags about not knowing who members of his administration are. That's not really a positive.
No, I don't know the gentleman. I was happy to do it. Mike requested that I do it. He should have done it a long time ago, in my opinion. He's an Obama appointment, and he had some difficulty. But I just don't know who he is. I don't know. I never heard his name.
Do
you believe there is a role for inspector generals to keep an administration
Yeah,
like
but I think
yours
they have
or
to be
anyone else
fair.
as accountable?
Sure, but I think they have to be fair. And I think it's a death wish when you, and I told my people, I said, I think you should, study your situation, but let us know. I think we've been treated very unfairly by inspector generals. I can go into instances, but I'm not going to do it now. But the inspector generals, when they're put in by Obama, just like it could be that if they were put in by me and it was somebody else's administration, especially the other party, it could very well be that you'd be treated unfairly. But we've had a lot of cases where we thought that was unfair. They asked me to do that. I think the big thing is that they should have asked me to do it a long time ago.
You said you don't know him, sir. What was he doing that was treating you unfairly?
I don't know. I don't know anything about him. I don't know anything about him other than the State Department and Mike in particular. I guess they weren't happy with the job he's doing or something. So because it's my right to do it, I said, sure, I'll do it. I've gotten rid of a lot of inspector generals. Every president has. I think every president has gotten rid of probably more than I have. A lot of our people kept the Obama inspector general, and I think generally speaking that's not a good thing to do, but they've kept him. But I told them for 3 years, I said, anybody wants to get rid of their inspector generals because they were appointed by President Obama, I think you should do so. Some of them didn't, but now a couple of them are doing it now. Yeah, go ahead.
The recent appearance of a conflict of interest of Secretary Pompeo is asking you to fire an inspector general.
That I can't tell you. I don't think so. I think maybe he thinks he's being treated unfairly. Again, he asked me if that would be possible. I said, I'll do that, sure. I think it should have been done a long time ago, frankly. And this is a man that has had some controversy, this inspector general. But so again,
this is a startling statement. Just think about this for a moment. President Trump said that he has never heard of this inspector general. He admits that he fired that inspector general. And now he just said that that inspector general that he's never heard of and knows nothing about has a long history of controversy that apparently, I guess, he knows about somehow, even though he's never heard of this particular inspector general.
He'll be, I think, even more successful again, especially if we get deductibility. And I really enjoyed this. This was a long meeting for me. Normally I wouldn't stay at a meeting this long, Tillman, but I liked hearing about your great basketball team. I didn't know those guys got paid $40. I thought they made $25. That's interesting.
For the record, my casino in Louisiana opened up today, and it opened up extremely, extremely busy in Louisiana. So that's good to know that people are coming out. So
that's great. What you do works. I've watched you for a long time, and what you do works. We're very proud of you.
I appreciate it.
Great job.
Sir, you sounded genuinely surprised about this PPP extension proposal.
Why was I surprised? You mean that they'd ask for it? Why would I be surprised?
You sounded surprised that
They want it. Of course they're going to ask for it.
that over the...
Surprised that's all they asked for, actually. I know too many of these people. I'm surprised that's all they asked for. No, I think what they're asking for is very reasonable, Steve. I mean, we're going to have to go and get it approved. And again, we've saved and we'll continue to save the restaurant business, and ultimately we'll be paid back many, many times because they pay a lot of taxes. And they create tremendous numbers of jobs. Think of that, 650,000 restaurants. Who would think that's even possible?
You had a final decision to fully defund our contribution to the WHO going forward?
Well, I have a concept because we paid $450,000, and somebody came out because we had different ideas. One was that, I could ask these brilliant people. So we help fund the World Health Organization. We use it like everyone else does. They gave us a lot of very bad advice, terrible advice. They were wrong so much, always on the side of China.
Again, the World Health Organization declared a global health emergency a full 6 weeks before Donald Trump declared an emergency.
Under 40. And some people thought that was too much. So we're going to make a decision fairly soon. But I think it's very unfair when we're paying $450. For many, many years, we've been paying $300, $400, $450, almost $500 sometimes.
The president is misrepresenting these numbers. I'm looking up what the accurate numbers are, or rather, Shelby in our newsroom is.
Considered a developing nation. If you're a developing nation, you get massive tax advantages and other advantages. Well, I want the United States to be a developing nation then, okay? We should get the same advantages as China gets. Why should China get advantages over the United States? Because they got somebody to say they're a developing nation. And so that's under review also.
Secretary Pompeo was reportedly under investigation both for having staffers.
All right, and I'm also looking up some of these claims, but just nations don't pay taxes to other nations. The idea that there are tax breaks for China is a confused statement.
Well, I don't know anything about it. I heard about it at the same time maybe you heard about it. I don't know anything about it. I mean, you mean he's under investigation because he had somebody walk his dog from the government? I don't know. Doesn't sound, I don't think it sounds like that important. I mean, you have a man that's supposed to be, and he's a brilliant guy, #1 at West Point, #1 at Harvard, I believe, Harvard Law School or close. But he was #1 at West Point, #1 at Harvard Law School, or very close to #1. And they're bothered because he's having somebody walk his dog, as you're telling me. I didn't know that. I didn't hear that. I didn't know about an investigation. But this is what you get with the Democrats. Here's a man supposed to be negotiating war and peace with major, major countries, with weaponry like the world has never seen before. And the Democrats and the fake news media, they're interested in a man who's walking their dog, and maybe he's busy, and maybe he's negotiating with Kim Jong-un, okay, about nuclear weapons.
Well, is Mike Pompeo negotiating with Kim Jong-un about nuclear weapons? That maybe that's kind of a big maybe. Government employees are not supposed to be used for to run personal errands, personal lackey errands for members of the government. There has been widespread scandal within the Trump administration of his cabinet members using public resources to pay for private things, like their mattresses, for instance. And if there was an investigation going on into whether the Secretary of State was using government resources, letting taxpayers pick up the tab for running people on errands to walk his dog and pick up his dry cleaning, or go out and pick up food for him, that actually is a relevant piece of information.
They're talking about, I know this, that we have countries that want to buy our arms, and we make it so difficult for them that they end up going to Russia and China. And under my administration, if they're friendly countries, I try and make it as easy as possible. If they want to buy our fighter jets, and if they want to give us billions and billions of dollars, and they have other alternatives, including China, Russia, and others, I think we should make it as easy as possible for them, and we should take the jobs and take the money, because it's billions of dollars. And in past administrations, they waited so long that people wouldn't even want to do business with us.
He's talking about selling weapons to other nations, and he's highlighted that he should send it to, that we should be selling them to friendly nations. Now, who is considered friendly by this administration is sometimes rather odd. He negotiated a deal to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia and did not let it be any encumbrance to this deal when the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia ordered the death of a U.S. journalist, of a Washington Post journalist who lived in the U.S., a father who lived in Virginia.
Please.
Sure.
I don't want you to become infected.
Even if it results in human rights abuses, that was Congress's concern with these.
President Trump just pressured the reporter to take off his mask. I will highlight that no one sitting at this table was wearing a mask. These restaurateurs, I hope that in their kitchens they wear masks. They were not wearing them at this table.
Walking, washing dishes. And you know what? I'd rather have him on the phone with some world leader than have him wash dishes, because maybe his wife isn't there or his kids are there. You know, what are you telling me? It's terrible. It's so stupid. You know how stupid that sounds to the world? Unbelievable. Okay, yeah.
Reaction to President Obama's speeches over the weekend.
Look, I think he was an incompetent president. I think President Obama was one of the worst presidents in the history of our country. I think he was an incompetent president. I know what he left us. He left us a broken military. He left us a military that ISIS was all over the place, and I got rid of it. I knocked out 100% of the caliphate, and even you will admit that, John. And when I came in, it was a...
It is not true that 100% of ISIS was wiped out.
Little on the shelves if you talk about pandemics. We had a country that was a mess. We were paying high taxes. We were paying, and outside of this artificial event that took place 2 months ago, and I'm going to build the country into stronger and better than it was even then. And it's already happening, and you can see it. You can see it today. Just take a look at the stock market. Look at what's going on. Look at the great numbers that are being called, and look at these medical companies calling in. And we're talking about more than one. So many things are happening. But I think President Obama was an incompetent president. He did a terrible job. And by the way, there was great division in our country with President Obama. You didn't see it as much, but there was tremendous division in our country. Okay?
I think President Trump just suggested that there was more division under President Obama in the country than there is now. I would like to highlight that we now have protesters storming state capitals with guns.
But also came here, and the whole world became infected by this horrible thing that they unleashed one way or the other. China
did not unleash the coronavirus epidemic any more than North America unleashed the H1N1 swine flu. President Trump is feeding into conspiracy theories that this was an intentional act when all medical evidence and the intelligence community suggest that this is a naturally occurring virus.
World Health wanted to, in all fairness to World Health. They wouldn't let World Health in. And we're a part of World Health. They wouldn't let them in either. They could have stopped it at the source, and they chose not to. And yet, they stopped them from going to Wuhan into different parts of China. So you couldn't go into Beijing. What do you think of that, Tillman? You couldn't go into China, but I better not get you involved in a China thing. You got enough problems with...
Restaurants in China are back, though.
I'm
they
asking,
are doing business.
I'm asking an interesting guy that question. But seriously, look, they wouldn't let him into China, but they'd let him into Europe, and they'd let him into all over the world, including the United States. It's lucky I did the ban. That's all I can tell you. It's lucky I did the ban. Okay, how about one or two more? Yeah.
The president keeps misrepresenting this so-called travel ban. I will give you some more information on it in a little bit.
Will you take steps to hold
China should be held responsible for what they've done. They have hurt the world very, very badly. They've hurt themselves also, but they've hurt the world very, very badly. Yeah, they should be held responsible.
This is an unprecedented suggestion. No one has ever suggested that North America be held responsible for the H1N1 virus.
And a fake whistleblower originally. He was a faker because when he looked at he wrote down a conversation that was totally different from the conversation I actually had with the president of Ukraine.
And this is not actually true. What the whistleblower in the Ukraine scandal reported to was confirmed by multiple witnesses, and in fact was ultimately confirmed by the President of the United States himself.
Disgraceful period of time, and we came out well. You know why we came out well? Because everyone recognized it for what it was, just a political witch hunt. But he was a fake whistleblower. He wrote a story that bore no resemblance to the conversation that I had with the president of Ukraine. Nothing whatsoever.
That is actually not true. This is simply not true. What the whistleblower reported was in fact what actually happened, that the President of the United States said that he wanted the President of Ukraine to do a favor, and that this favor, in fact, turned out to be a personal political favor of investigating President Trump's rivals. And President Trump, as has been confirmed by multiple witnesses, made congressionally approved taxpayer-funded military aid contingent upon this personal favor.
He's, loser. But other than a half a vote we had from Romney, I got 52.5% to a half. In the House, we got...
President Trump just said that Mitt Romney's vote was a half vote. I guess he's suggesting that Mitt Romney is not a full senator or a full human being. Mitt Romney, whatever disagreements one might have with his policies or his votes, he is a full-fledged human being and a full-fledged senator, and his vote counts as a full vote.
Jail if he lies, because they have immunity in the halls of Congress, in the Great Hall. So he made a statement that was totally different from what I said. You know that. 8 times quid pro quo. There were no quid pro quos, nothing, 0. 8 times, over and over again. And he made it as though that was the conversation.
This is not true. President Trump has latched on to Adam Schiff paraphrasing the conversation that he had, and has repeatedly said that because it was not actually the word-for-word conversation that was had, that it was made up, that he was lying. Schiff was openly acknowledging that he was paraphrasing and making an analogy.
Well, he went out, and he's the one that approved the hydroxychloroquine. He's the one that signed the application. He also happens to be, if you look, see whether or not, I won't put it on me, I'll put it on you. See whether or not he was a big contributor to the Democrats. See whether or not he wanted the Democrats to win. No, there's a lot of bad things coming out about him. But you people don't want to write the news, But if you look, but he's the one that signed the application.
Okay, and on this I've got to get more deeply into in a minute as well. President Trump is talking about Dr. Rick Bright, the top scientist who was responsible for the for leading our efforts in the vaccine, in our attempts to get a vaccine. President Trump fired him, and now he's suggesting that it is because he was a supporter of Democrats. That would be an appalling situation if President Trump feels that the scientist who is leading the cause in the U.S. to arriving at a vaccine should be fired because he supports Democrats, because he is an individual person who votes.
Doctors take it, excuse me. A lot of doctors take it. I take it. Yeah, I hope to not be able to take it soon because, I hope they come up with some answer. But I think people should be allowed to. I got a letter from a doctor the other day from Westchester, New York, around the area. He didn't want anything. He just said, sir, I have hundreds of patients, and I give them hydroxychloroquine. I give them the Z-Pak, which is zithromycin, and I give them zinc. And out of the hundreds of patients, many hundreds, over 300 patients, I haven't lost one. He said, please keep pressing that, sir. And if you look at that phony report that was put in, that report on the hydroxy was given to people that were in extraordinarily bad condition. Extraordinarily bad. People that were dying. No, I think for whatever it's worth, I take it. I would have told you that 3-4 days ago, but we never had a chance because you never asked me the question.
The White House doctor recommended you take that? Is that why you're...
Yeah, White House doctor. I didn't recommend. No, I asked him, what do you think? He said, well, if you'd like it. I said, yeah, I'd like it. I'd like to take it. A lot of people are taking it. A lot of frontline workers are taking hydroxychloroquine. A lot of I don't take it because, hey, people said, oh, maybe he owns the company. No, I don't know the company. You know what? I want the people of this.
He does have financial ties to 2 of the companies that make it. I'm still just getting my head around the fact that he has acknowledged that he himself is taking hydroxychloroquine. That seems to be what he is saying.
Doctors and nurses.
And not at the suggestion of a doctor.
Preventative. And they're taking, totally unrelated, but they take the Z-Pak or the zithromycin for possible infection. Now, I haven't taken that other than an original dose because all you need, you don't have to take it simultaneously. But the zinc you do take. So I'm taking the 2, the zinc and the hydroxy. And all I can tell you is so far I seem to be okay.
Can you explain Though, why you started taking it? Have you been
Yeah,
exposed?
because, no, not at all. I just said that I've had so many letters from people, like the one I told you about. I got it last week. Would you like a copy of it? I'd love to give you. If you ask Molly, she'll give you a copy of it. But this is a doctor. He doesn't want anything. I don't know him, never heard of him. But he treats people that we're talking about. And he said out of hundreds of people that he's treated, he hasn't lost one. And he just wanted me to know about it. That's all. He wasn't saying, gee, could I have dinner with you, Mr. President? I'd like to come to the White House. But I've received many such letters. I've received a lot of positive letters. And it seems to have an impact. And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But if it doesn't, you're not going to get sick or die.
That's actually not true. Hydroxychloroquine has potentially lethal side effects. It has potentially fatal interactions with one of the most common diabetes medicines. It can, in many patients, cause cardiac arrest. It is highly dangerous to take without the guidance of a doctor. There is no conclusive evidence suggesting that it is helpful in treating the coronavirus. The most widespread study that has been done in the U.S. found that more patients who took it died than patients who did not.
Aren't big Trump fans, gave it, and we've done the greatest job maybe of anything in the VA, because I got VA Choice and VA Accountability, both approved. Accountability, Tillman, is where you can fire bad people that work in the VA, that you couldn't fire them. We had thousands of people that were sadists, that were stealing, that were robbers, that were horrible people. They'd beat up our veterans. They couldn't do it in prime time, but they did it when they were sick. And we got accountability. Nobody thought you could get it because of the unions and civil service. I got it passed so that now you fire bad people in the VA. We got rid of tremendously bad people that should never been there. But I also got, probably even more importantly, if you can say that, maybe not, VA Choice. So if you have to wait online for a doctor, you go outside, you have a private doctor, we pay the bill. We work out deals with doctors. We have pricing. So you go out, you pay the bill. And it was a great thing that we did. So we've done a great job with the VA, but they had a report come out. And the results of the report, it was a very unscientific report, by the way, but I get a lot of tremendously positive news on the hydroxy, and I say, hey, you know the expression I've used, John? What do you have to lose? Okay, what do you have to lose?
Potentially your life is what you have to lose. Again, hydroxychloroquine has very potentially dangerous side effects. It causes heart arrhythmia and cardiac arrest in some patients, and it can have potentially lethal interactions with one of the more common medicines used for treatment of diabetes.
The president, so they want to test me. I don't want to be tested, but they want to test me. So every couple of days I get tested, and I've shown always negative, right? Negative, is that the term you use for this, right? Negative, totally negative. No symptoms, no nothing. But no, I take it because I think I hear very good things. Again, you have to go to frontline workers. Many frontline workers take it, and they seem to be doing very well.
I also want to highlight President Trump repeatedly takes credit for passing the Veterans Choice Program. This was passed in 2014 under President Obama. It was a bipartisan bill from the Obama era. Trump has repeatedly falsely claimed credit for it.
In terms of my taking it, but I thought it was a very well-crafted letter by a man who's a respected doctor up in Westchester, maybe a little beyond Westchester, a little up higher, and in New York. And he didn't want anything. He just wanted me to know the results of what he's doing as a doctor. And he was so happy with the fact that I fight for this stuff. And then we have this crazy whistleblower, this fake whistleblower get out and try and, knock it.
Dr. Rick Bright is not a fake whistleblower. He is, in fact, one of the nation's top scientists. The most comprehensive study on hydroxychloroquine done to date is still inconclusive, but it showed no benefits for treatment of the coronavirus, and again, there were more deaths among those given hydroxychloroquine versus standard care. The president seems to have abruptly ended his news conference. I think he might have once again ended it in anger. There were a lot of wild claims made near the end of it. There is, I think, more than I can get into here. President Trump is back on the hydroxychloroquine bandwagon. Again, hydroxychloroquine has not been shown to be effective in treating the coronavirus. It has, in fact, there are strong reasons to suggest that it may do more harm than good. The president does have financial ties to two companies that make it, although he has denied that that is a factor in why he has been so aggressive in pushing it. Dr. Rick Bright, one of the nation's top scientists who was responsible for leading the efforts to develop a vaccine, was fired from his position, and he claims that it was because he questioned President Trump's promotion of hydroxychloroquine. We heard Dr. Rick Bright's testimony before Congress last week. He said that his sacking was political payback for questioning the president. President Trump has been shifting his story on Dr. Rick Bright. Now he claims that Dr. Bright was a false whistleblower and a Democrat. Before that, he was claiming that he had never heard of him. Again, it is not actually a positive thing for the President of the United States not to have ever heard of key members of his administration, particularly the scientist who is leading the charge to create a vaccine against the greatest viral threat that our country has arguably ever faced. Dr. Bright, in his testimony, said that he tried to warn the administration of the deadly threat of COVID-19 in January, but his concerns were dismissed. In particular, he tried to highlight the lack of available masks. He said that the U.S. would need more masks and need them quickly, and urged the administration to begin producing them in mass numbers in January. Had the U.S. done that, he says there would have been fewer deaths. That seems to be the case. There have been over 9,200 medical professionals who have become sick from this disease. Over 100 nurses have died, and the lack of personal protective equipment is an undeniable factor in that. The testimony of Dr. Bright was corroborated by Michael Bowen, the CEO of one of the nation's largest mask-producing companies, who testified that he offered to make the U.S. government 1.7 million masks per week, N95 masks, but this was turned down. Dr. Rick Bright testified that he fears that unless there is a more coherent nationwide plan of response, the U.S. will face, quote, unprecedented illness and fatalities, and he said that the U.S. is about to face, quote, the darkest winter in modern history. President Trump said a number of false things about President Obama and Obamagate. We have released a few videos highlighting this. But the long and the short of it is that President Trump has a long history of baseless conspiracy theories, many of them surrounding President Obama. This current one involves the so-called unmasking of Michael Flynn. For starters, this is not what it sounds like. Here's all that it means. It's the job of U.S. intelligence agencies to spy on potentially hostile foreign actors. It is not typically their job to spy on Americans. So when an American communicates with a foreign actor who is under surveillance, the American's words may get picked up in that communication, but the name is masked in the transcripts of the surveilled conversations to protect the American's privacy. So now, what happened was that after Russia got caught meddling in the U.S. 2016 election, as multiple intelligence agencies and even the Republican Senate Intelligence Committee have confirmed happened. The U.S. intelligence agencies were listening in on the telephone conversations of the Russian ambassador. Now, before President Obama left office, Michael Flynn called the Russian ambassador to discuss undermining sanctions President Obama had placed on Russia. Since U.S. Intel was listening to the ambassador's calls, that conversation was picked up, but since Flynn was a U.S. citizen, on the initial transcripts, he would have appeared simply as something like U.S. Citizen 1. Now, because the conversation pertained to national security, and since the conversation pertained to an ongoing investigation, intelligence officials decided that they needed to know who U.S. Citizen 1 was, and they asked that U.S. Citizen 1's name be unmasked. This is a routine thing. That does not mean it would be made public. That just means that on these documents that the intelligence agency, that the NSA and the FBI might have been using, that this name would be revealed. Now, the only part of this that is now, and I also want to highlight that unmasking is routine and has been done tens of thousands of times during the Trump era. The only part of this that is scandalous is that Flynn was trying to undermine President Obama's foreign policy while he was in office. Flynn knew this was wrong, which is why he lied about it to the FBI, which is also a crime. That seems to be the crux of this latest so-called Obamagate conspiracy theory. The president has also tried to suggest that Obama was responsible for the Mueller investigation, but of course Robert Mueller was a Republican who was appointed by Rod Rosenstein, another Republican who was appointed by Trump himself. The Mueller investigation began after Barack Obama had left office. It is absurd to suggest that it was started by President Obama. And then, wow, there was a lot of other stuff today that I'd wanted to get into. Just the fact that this roundtable of restaurant executives had no women at the table, even though women account for over 50% of restaurant and food businesses. This is something that is personal to our household. My wife used to run a baking company in New York City. That is her reacting to that particular shout out. So it is rather startling that there were no women at the table. It is also a little disconcerting that so many of the people at the table were billionaire executives of major chain restaurants, when so many of the restaurants are small, privately owned restaurants, and that these are the restaurants that keep neighborhoods fed, that create jobs in neighborhoods. It is not just these chain restaurants. It was rather shocking to hear a former Goldman Sachs investor saying that he makes more as a restaurant owner than he did as a hedge fund manager, when I know firsthand what razor-thin margins most small food company owners work on. About 37% of small restaurant owners are immigrants. That is why it is so troubling that the president, that's one of the many reasons why it's troubling that the president of the United States frequently scapegoats immigrants, not only undocumented immigrants, but he is actively seeking to limit the ability of people to come here with documentation. He's making it harder to get green cards. Immigrants historically are greater job creators than U.S.-born citizens. So that is kind of a run-through of some of the main topics that we hit here today. My name, again, is Alan Piper. I am the senior politics producer at NowThis. If you care to follow me on Twitter, I am apiper13. I promise that I tweet far less than the President of the United States. I was backed up today by many members of our newsroom. All of us are working remotely, working from home, because we are staying safe in this time of crisis. Many of us are based in New York City, the global epicenter of the coronavirus pandemic. I want to particularly thank Brandon Caruso, Jackson Davis, Maddie Green, and Shelby Vacaville. To everyone out there, please stay safe. Please take care of yourself. Please do not start taking hydroxychloroquine just because you hear the president say that he is taking it without doctors even recommend that he do so. Don't do this. Follow the advice of actual doctors. Don't inject yourself with disinfectant either. The President of the United States has been offering unsound medical advice. Stick to the guidance of actual trained medical professionals. Take care of yourself, check in on the people that you care about, and please let them know how much they mean to you. We are going to get through this thing together. If the President does an event tomorrow, I will see you then. I will also bring you live the cheers and applause that will be bursting out throughout New York City at 7 p.m. this evening. Thank you for tuning in, and please stay safe.
A lot of good things have come out about the hydroxy. A lot of good things have come out. You'd be surprised at how many people are taking it, especially the frontline workers, before you catch it. The frontline workers, many are taking it. I happen to be taking it. I happen to be